And hopefully for the course material, everybody is, once we go through the exercise every day, you're going back to W3 schools and reading through the contents. These W3 schools is pretty good content, to go back and just go ahead and do a quick refresher. Uh, so for last week, right, we covered the if else, just a quick refresher. So you basically call the if, you put the paren, put your conditional here, and you open your brackets and close your brackets. A quick example, like let's say 20 is greater than 18, right? You print that. If it's true, it executes the loop. It executes the if condition. We also talked about the if else. So if this condition is true, this block of code gets executed, else that other block of code gets executed. Then we did not talk about this, so we'll go over this in the class today. If, else, if, and else, we'll go over that class today. The other things we talked about last week, we talked about advanced conditionals, and also we talked about the ternary operator. So basically, instead of doing if, else, you can use the question mark and colon. You put your conditional right within your params. If that's true, then execute whatever comes after the question mark, otherwise execute whatever comes after the colon. And ternaries you use pretty frequently, so you should be aware of that. The other conditionals we covered are the logical operators, ampersand, so basically both the conditions are true, it executes, otherwise it doesn't execute. Or operators, if one of the conditions is true, it executes. If both the conditions are false, it doesn't execute, okay? Any questions on what we covered last week? All right, we'll do a quick refresher, and the purpose of this refresher is to make sure that, a couple of things that we covered last week, but also to set the ground for the week going forward, for this class today. So I'm going to go ahead and paste the Kahoot, and let's see if we can go ahead and play this Kahoot. Richard, did we have 11 or 9?
Looks like we have 12 students now in our class.
Okay.
So one more student.
Is anybody having an issue joining the Kahoot? I think we're expecting one more.
I don't see. Oh, Alisa is in here. So maybe, yeah, she won't be joining. So I think we're good.
Okay, cool.
11 players, yeah.
All right. I think majority of you got it correct. Like 3 of them we got, I mean, you put 0, just so that everybody follows along, right? So if you do, let's say, if you do int I plus plus, and then, and you print out the value of I, right? Let's say, maybe it's declared somewhere already. All right, cool. So if you execute this plus plus operator basically is equivalent to I equal to I plus 1, okay? So that's why the result will be 1. It's not going to be 0, okay? And we'll be using in the, you will be using this in the for loops, and that's why I put that in the quiz. So let's go to the next question. Good job, guys. And we'll go over this in the class today as we cover methods, but a method can take more than one parameter. And I think majority of you got it correct. Ah, good job. Hmm, I'm surprised with this. We'll be going over methods in today's lecture, and that's the reason I have a lot of questions about methods. But basically the question is identify the method that returns a string as a return type from the method, right? So for the signature of your method, you always have public or private and a return type. In this case, your string is the return type and this is the name of the method, okay? So the question is which method returns a string? So in this case, this is the one that returns string. Yeah? This method does not return anything. That's why the return type is void. This method returns a Boolean type, and this method returns an int type, okay? But we'll be going over more details in the course today. This is just kind of a refresher to kind of get you kind of warmed up a little bit. Good job, guys. So, yep, if a method returns nothing, you've got to use the void keyword. I think we have different leaders from last week, so that's good. So for today's course, we will be, we touched base on, we did a refresher, we did the refresher quiz. I was hoping like last week we would cover if else if, so we didn't get time, so we will be covering that today. We'll be covering switch statements. With that, with switch statements, the most basic part of Java is done. Uh, the complex parts of Java really start with arrays, for loops. So for those advanced folks, thanks for sticking so far, okay? Once we get to arrays and for loops, we'll have much more challenging stuff. We'll also touch base on while loop, do while loops, and quickly touch base on the break and continue statements. We'll look at introduction to methods, and then for your assignment, you'll be doing bubble sort, okay? Any questions on what we're going to cover today? All right. Um, so let's quickly touch base on if else statements. So basically if else, right? It executes. So if your value is true, then it executes the statement right here. Else if this value is true, then it executes this, else it executes that, and you can have multiple else if statements, okay? So only one of these gets executed. Just let me uncomment this thing and do a quick run here. So basically it's saying, I'm declaring a type integer, giving it 22. So uh, 22 is not less than 10, so it's not going to execute this. It's going to go to the else if. Uh, it's going to see if 22 is less than 20. That doesn't satisfy it too, so it's not going to do this. It's going to just execute the else statement. Any question on the else, if else, else? It's pretty similar to the if and else, but we're just having another if and else, okay? And you can have multiple else ifs if you want, All right.
If you
Then,
had more lines down below it, what would they say? Like underneath the else ifs and the else.
so if you have another else if like this, Gracie, that was Gracie, right?
Isabella.
Isabella, yeah. So basically, if this condition is true, right, then it'll execute Isabella. So let's say if it's 21, right? And then let's say you can have another else, this is something like that, right? So you can have multiple. So in this case, right, you'll see if 22 is less than 21, right? It's not true, right? So it'll go to the else statement again,
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Good question, Isabella. I went over this pretty quickly because we covered the if else in the last lecture, So the next thing we want to cover is the switch, and this is, you'll use this pretty frequently. So basically you declare the switch statement and then you give it a value. Depending on the value of the switch statement, it will execute one of the cases, okay? So in this case, we are declaring an int, which with the value of with the value of 4. So if the case is 4, right, it goes and executes this particular statement. And normally in a switch statement, you'll always use the break. That basically tells you that you do not want to execute anything else, break from this, right? And it's also good to basically give a default case here, And if anybody wants to know the shortcut for this, system.out.println, you can just say sys out and use your control and space bar, and that would basically create the system.out.println statement. Okay. So the switch statement, right? So you basically declare a variable, and depending on the variable, it will execute one of your case statements. Okay. So in this case, we declared integer of type day and the value of 4. And since the value is 4, it goes and executes this particular case statement. Okay. Any questions on these switch statements? And as a good practice, you always define your defaults, okay? So that if none of the cases are met, right, it'll go and execute your default case. Any questions? And this material is present in W3 schools, but if anybody wants, right, for reference purposes, I'm going to go ahead and put this in your Slack channel. All right, so this is the main course for today. So we're going to be talking about arrays data type. So arrays data type is basically just a list of values, okay? So for example, I can say, normally when we declare an int, right? Like let's say int I equal to 0, something like that, right? But what if I want to declare a list of values, right? That's when I will use an array data type. The way you define an array data type, so after you give it the type, you basically use the brackets to say that is an array data type. Pretty similar how you define your regular data types, right? You'll give it a name of the variable, and then within curly braces, you give it the values, right? In this case, we defined a string array data type. So basically, I'm giving it string values instead here. If I wanted to declare an integer array, right? So pretty similar, I would say int, give it my brackets, and give it a variable name. And I can say 1, 2, 3. So any questions on what an array is and how do you declare an array? And the values should match the data type, okay? So if there are no questions on that, the next thing is, how do you access values in the array? So let's say I want to access the first element in the array, right? From last week, we saw that Java is basically 0 index, right? So if you want to access the first element in your array, so basically you want to access when I say first element, it is the element at 0 index, okay? So I'm going to call the variable, and within square brackets, I'm going to say the index of the element I want to access. Let's say in this case, I want to access the element at 0, right? And I can go ahead and give it a type here. Okay, and you see the return type. This basically returns a type of integer. That's why I have to declare a string variable. And let's go ahead and print out the value. So this should basically print me color sensor, okay? All right, any questions on that? How do you declare an array? How do you access elements at an array? All right, one thing you'll have to note, like the size of this array, right? So this array contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So it contains 5 elements. Uh, so basically from an index perspective, right? So it is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's say if I try to access an element in the array that is not there, right? So if I access the element at index 5, right? Let's see what happens. You basically see that you get an exception, array index out of bound exception. That basically means that you're accessing an element that's not there in the array. It's over the size of the array. So if I access 4 instead, so it'll give you this value. All right. And you'll see that index out of the out of bounds exception pretty frequently, yeah, because of the errors you will be making, So if you see that index out of bounds, basically that means you're accessing an element in your array that is basically beyond the size of your array, okay? Any questions so far?
Can you connect this to how we could use it in, like, kind of like the last exercise, how it had to do with the robot, how we
Yeah,
could use that in program?
yeah. I think, is that Isabella or Gracie?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, we will get to an exercise pretty soon, Gracie or Isabella. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name. But I'll show you how exactly you will do things in what are these most frequent operations in an array, okay? And we will go over that extensively, So for now, just hold on a little bit. Let me go through, once we get through the end of this class, we'll go through an exercise, right? And then you'll see what are the common operations that you will actually be doing on an array, okay? And some of the exercises we will be doing are basically more of a college level exercise, but you kind of at least get a feel of, what are the most important things you'll be doing on an array, okay? So just a little patience. Um, if you want to change the value of an element, right? Let's say I want to change the value of the zeroth element, right? In the array and give it a different value, right? So basically I would say, give it the variable name, give it the index of the element you want to change, and give it a new name. Okay? So in this case, I am basically changing the element at index 0. Okay? And let's see if I go ahead and print out what's the value of the element at the index 0, right? So you see we set the value to be acceleration sensor, and I'm trying to access the value at the 0th index. So it kind of prints acceleration sensor, okay? Any questions on basically changing values of an array? All right. The next thing we want to see is how do I iterate over the elements of the array, okay? And for our first simple exercise, right, we want to iterate over the elements of this array and print out the values at each index, okay? So there are two ways you can iterate over elements of the array. The first method is basically you say for, and then you give it the type of each element in your array. In this case, right, my type is string, and you give it a value, say, let's say current value, and then you give it your array. Okay, and then you can basically, let's say in this case, I want to print out the current value. So this is one way to iterate over your array. Okay, so go ahead and let me go ahead and comment these out, the earlier statements. So you basically see, hey, we had an array, right? Color sensor, light sensor, gyro sensor, ultrasonic and voltage sensor. And then we're replacing the first element or the element at index 0, right? So it's going to replace color sensor. And then let's say you're printing out the values in your array, right? So it's basically going to print acceleration sensor since that's replaced, and then the remaining values. So that's one way to iterate over your arrays. Okay. So the next way you iterate over arrays, and this is probably the most frequent way, and for your exercise today, you'll be using the second mechanism to iterate over your arrays, okay? Uh, so you have a for statement, similar, and you'll declare an integer I equal to 0, I less than, let me type it out first and then we'll kind of go with this. Sorry, my autocomplete was not working because I didn't have the semicolon. So this basically says, what is your starting index? Okay, so I want to start from the 0th index. What value should I iterate up to? Okay, so it says iterate up to hardware components dot length. Okay, and length is basically the size of your array. Okay, and then it's saying what is my increment. Okay, so I'm saying increment I by one value every time. So we saw this in the exercise. So this is very similar to I equal to I plus 1. And let's say I want to print out the value at I. Okay. So in this case, basically it's saying print out from the array, print out the ith element, right? And let's see what happens. So basically it's getting, as this loop goes through, the first time when this loop executes, right, it's going to say I is equal to 0, right? And then it comes within the loop, it says hardware components of 0, and it prints out acceleration sensor. Okay, and then the loop completes. After the loop completes, right, this is the increment operator every time. So it says I is equal to I plus 1, right? So it increments I value to 1, okay? So the current value was 0, and then the next value is 1. And it checks if I, right, 1 is less than the hardware components dot length, which is in this case, it is less, right? Because the length of your array is 5. So is 1 less than 5? The condition is true. So it goes and executes this loop one more time. Just for the sake of, just so that it's much more clearer, let's go ahead and print the value of I2, okay, for every iteration. So you see the value of I is 0, then the value of I becomes 1, 2, 3, and 4. Any questions on the for loop and how would you do a for loop? All right. Instead of printing it in different lines, right? Let's say I want to print it in the same line. I can just do print ln, so it's a little bit more clearer. And then let's give it some space over here, just so that it's more. So basically this one, 0 is the index of the current element in the array, And then this is the value of the current element in the array. Any questions on that? All right, I have an exercise coming up, so if there are any questions, ask me. Otherwise, we can go through the exercise. All right, for your reference, I'm going to go ahead and paste this in Slack. Okay, so you have this for reference. Let me see. So there are no questions on arrays. So this is a simple example to iterate over an array and then just print out the values, right? All right, for your exercise that you can do right now, I want you to find out if there is a string in your array, okay? So let's pick a string. Let's say I want to find out if there is ultrasonic sensor within your array, okay? So what I want you to do is loop through the array, right? If ultrasonic sensor is found in your array, go ahead and print out saying that you found the value. Else, print out that you didn't find. I mean, uh, don't worry about the else part. If you find a value, just go ahead and print out saying that, hey, you found a value in your array. Okay. So as an exercise, do you guys want to go ahead and start implementing this? Any questions on the exercise? Gracie, Isabella, do you guys have any questions on the exercise?
So for the exercise, you want us to make a program with the part that's highlighted, check if ultrasonic sensor is present in your array.
Yeah, if it's there in your array, print that, you found the value in your array, okay? Just to kind of get used to your for loops, right? So I want you to loop through the array, and if you find the value, go ahead and print it, right? So you can declare, let's say, go and declare a string that says value to find or something like that, right? And basically see if you can find this value in your array, okay? And if you find it in your array as a next step, also print out the index where you found the value in your array, okay? Very simple exercise, So, but just to get you used to the for loops, okay? All right, I'll give you like 5 to 10 minutes. Go ahead and see if you can complete this exercise. And if anybody has any question while others are doing the exercise, go ahead and ask me. once you're done, if you can let me know. And then I'd like somebody to go and share their screen and explain what you did, after maybe 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. Let me know once you're all done. Okay.
Do you think you can move your screen up a little bit so we can see the beginning of the program?
Okay. And I did post this thing.
Oh, is that in Slack?
Yes. Let me pull up Slack. So basically I did post the string in Slack, right? So you can get the string from here, and then you can use this for reference, right? So you want to iterate over your arrays, and then you want to see at each element in the array, right? If it's equivalent to, let's say in this case, I want to see if it's ultrasonic sensor, right? If you find the value, go and print out where you found the value, at which index you found the value. Does anybody need any help?
I need help.
Is that Tyra?
Yes,
All right, Tyra. So let me know which part do you need help at? Is
it's
it
just I don't know what I did, but my screen is all colorful. Like the lines are highlighted in colors.
okay? So you must be having a compilation issue, Tyra. So do you want to go ahead and share your screen?
Can you go over again what it means when the ultrasonic sensor is like in your array?
So if you find the string ultrasonic sensor in your array, I want you to print out the index where you found that ultrasonic sensor, okay? So in this case, right, just 1 minute, Tara, okay? Just give me 1 minute. So if you look at my array, so you have color sensor, you have light sensor, gyro sensor, ultrasonic sensor, and voltage sensor, right? The ultrasonic sensor is at index 0, 1, 2, 3, right? 3. So if you find the keyword ultrasonic sensor, so you'll go ahead and print out the index which you found the ultrasonic sensor is 3, okay? So what you have to do, right? So as you iterate over the array, Tara, just let me kind of go ahead and share my screen for a minute and then you can take control back, okay?
Okay.
And let me go and put some pseudocode in just so that everybody's following, right? So in the for loop, right, if you want to iterate over your array, right, you basically use the for loop and you give it the index. And the element at the index, right, of I, you can access it by saying your array of I, okay, by using the square brackets, so sample, right? So you basically want to say if hardware components of I, right? So basically you're accessing the element at the ith index, right? And say if it's equal to your string, whatever your string you're searching for, right? In this case, let's say I want to search for this string called ultrasonic sensor. So let me move this up. So if at all, the value of the element at the ith index is equivalent to value you want to find, go ahead and print out something like, and give it the index where you found it, right? And then you will close the if statement, okay? So it's just using some of the things that we learned in the last class. Was that Gracie or was that Isabella?
Isabella.
Yep, so Isabella, so basically any follow-up questions? Do you want me to go over this once more?
I think that definitely helped clear it up, but I'm having trouble understanding the index value.
Okay, so basically you're having trouble understanding what the I means. So index is basically what your current value of I is as well, okay? So for example, right, in this case, we are saying, when you're using a for loop, right, you always say, hey, what is your start index, okay, or start value for I? Where do you want to go to? And then what do you increment I by every time, okay? So every time what happens in this for loop is, right, I starts with 0, okay, starts with 0, and then it completes this loop once, okay? And then it sees what your increment is. So it increments I by 1. So the second time it goes through this loop, the value of I is 1, okay? So the current value of I is called index, okay? So if I print this out, right, the first column that you see is the index. Another way to put this, Isabella, is like, so the color sensor, right? The color sensor, if you say what is the index for color sensor, it's going to be 0, or it's basically the position for the element in the array, okay?
Thank you.
Tyra, do you want to share now?
Okay.
Do one thing, Tara. You can go ahead and, yesterday we saw how to comment things out, right? Can you go ahead and put a block comment in
Okay. For where?
for the switch statement? Right from line 53 all the way till 78. and you got to put a star and close it. All right. And then are you missing after line number 52? Let's see. Can you close the break? Close that by putting a bracket
Where?
after line number 52. Yeah, go to the next line and then close the. Uh, you can close that. See, you have a opening bracket and then you have to have a closing bracket too, right? All right. Go down, Tara. Let's see what else is going on down there. Can you hover over that red X over there? Let's see what it's complaining about. Saying it's expecting another opening brace. Let me see if I can take control there. Okay. Or do you want to put it in Slack, Tara, so I can go ahead and copy the whole thing and just send me a personal Slack? I can take a quick look at it. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Tara, can you go back and share your screen? I just wanted to, I think you just have 2 brackets extra, Tara. Go back to your go back to your Eclipse and go all the way down. Get rid of line 83 and 84, Tara. All right, so you could, now you can compile the code and you can run it too. All right, so you can go to Slack, Tara, and then I pasted the sample. So go ahead and copy that. Right, and then you can go ahead and execute, copy this and execute it. All right, so basically you see we are printing out the index first, right, and the value at that index. Okay, so we're iterating over the loop, we are printing out the index and the value at the index, right? So you want to see if at all, as you iterate over the loop, right, you can find the value ultrasonic sensor, right? So maybe after line 84, go ahead and put a if statement and see if you can find it, right? So if, right, so you can open your paren. You can open a paren, Tara.
Where do I
Oh,
open up?
So I'm saying like, go back to your editor, right? If you want to use an if statement, right? So you can open up yep, that's good. And then say, you want to access the element at the index I and check if it's equivalent to ultrasonic sensor, right? So the way you access elements at the index I is basically giving it the name of your array, using the square brackets and giving it I, right? So go ahead and type that up. Hardware components of I. And use your control spacebar. Cool. And then use a square brackets of I. So that basically you're accessing the element at that ith index, right? Go and, yep. And outside the square brackets, Tara, but within your parents, no, don't do that. Within your parents, right? Yeah. Go say equal to, and then give it ultrasonic sensor, right? You want to compare strings, right? So give it quotes ultrasonic sensor. In double quotes, yep. All right, then go to the entire and then give it a, yeah, brackets, right? Opening brace Tara. Not that I like, yep, cool, good job. And then you can print out just make sure you close it also, Tara. Go to the next line and then close your opening brace, right? Good job, okay. After line 85, go and enter. After line 85, add a new line after 85 and put a system.out.println control spacebar. Good job, right? And then say, you can give it a string tag saying something like ultrasonic sensor found at index. And we are going to print it, right? Just say a string, right? You're going to print out a string saying that ultrasonic sensor found at index. Cool. And then say plus, because you want to concat things, Tara. So you, after the double quotes, right? Do a plus and say I. Yep, plus I. Not like that. Just say, use the plus operator, right? Yep, that's good. Go ahead and run this, Tara. All right. Do you see your result?
Yep.
Cool. Go ahead and change the case just to see that, it's not, go ahead and like on line 85, go ahead and change the case, right? Just say maybe a small u or a small s or something like that, you can change it to something altogether different, right? Yeah, just go and run it. All right, so you see it doesn't print anything, right? Just an exercise to iterate over loops, right? And then if you find an element, print out the value, right? All right. Anybody has any other questions?
I have one question. Mine is printing out ultrasonic sensor is at all places, and I don't know what I did wrong.
Okay, is this Neil?
Yes.
All right, Neil, do you want to go and share?
Uh-huh.
And has anybody completed their exercise? I'm just curious. All right, I think Jack's completed his exercise. So Neil, let's do this, right? I want to see if Jack can take a look at your code and see what's wrong, okay, before I go ahead and say what's wrong, okay?
Okay.
Jack, do you want to take a quick look? Take a look at Neil's code and see if you can figure out if anything is wrong. And you can use a block comment, Neil, if the other things are coming in your way, right? You can go ahead and use a block comment, right? Do you know how to use?
I forgot how to do that. How do I do that again?
So go to, so you'll do a / Neil right there, / and star. No,
That?
sorry, the other one. Yeah, forward, yeah, and star. Okay. And then after line number 25, and then do a star and / do a star and / No, the
Oh,
other way.
sorry.
Yep. No, / Neil. Good job. All right.
Okay.
All right. We'll give Jack a minute or two. And if anybody else has finished it, right, I want you to take a look at Neil's screen and see if you can figure out what's going on. Go ahead and run it once more, Neil, just so that everybody sees. And
Is it because is it because it's case sensitive and the S is not capitalized?
yeah, let's give that. I mean, that's definitely an issue, right? We saw that Java is case sensitive, right?
Should I run again?
Yep. All right, that's not it. The one thing I would tell you, Neil, is see there is a semicolon on line 29. Yeah, sorry, line 29.
Yeah.
Get rid of that semicolon.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it not supposed to go after an if statement?
No, it's not supposed to go after an if statement. You're
Okay.
correct. Okay. Go ahead and run this once more.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. That was the problem.
Yep. Good job. And just for fun, Neil, let's try to do this, right? While you're here, try on line 27, right? So basically, the second, like where it says I less than hardware components dot length, right? That basically is the final value to which your array should iterate, right?
Yeah.
So says just instead of hardware components dot length, go and say hardware components dot length +1, okay? Okay, and just go and run this. You can kind of see, you know, you get the array out index out of bounds, right? Basically, you're accessing an element that is over the size of your array, okay? We kind
Okay.
of saw that array index out of bounds, right? But this is an example, you know, and just so that you're going to consistently experience this index out of bounds error, you know, that basically means you're accessing something that is over the length of your array, right? So you just get a clue, you know, where do you have to go and take a look, okay? So
Okay.
go and get rid of the +1. All right, anybody else?
So
All right, Anya, nice try. Yeah, but it was because of the semicolon, Anya. Go ahead, Richa, sorry.
so one thing I just wanted to call out is like you need not have to write all the code in just one file.
you can create multiple files, so you don't have to keep commenting out the block of code. You can just like, how you created hello world, you can create one more class and add those details in that class.
Gracie, Isabella, do you guys have questions? Did you all complete the exercise?
I was following along as you were going through all of them, but I wasn't writing it down. Do I still
Okay.
need to go back through and?
That's fine, Isabella. Like, we have a very good exercise coming up, so that you can do the exercise after the class too. That's fine.
Okay.
Anybody else has any questions? All right. I'm going to take control back. We'll kind of go over the next steps here. We're going to go a little over today, okay? We have to cover a couple of things more. The one thing I wanted to cover now, we always said, we'll come back and revisit this later, right? So hopefully this one now makes sense, okay? This is basically saying the main method here takes an argument of type string, and that argument is an array, and then the value is basically, in this case, it's called args, okay? And how you can basically try this out, right? If you go to, in this case, arrays for loop exercise. So basically, I went to run configurations, and in my arguments, right? In this case, I'm passing values separated by a comma. So what's going to happen is it's going to convert these arguments and store them in the args variable, okay? And if you want to print them out, right? So let's say I want to print out the arguments that are passed into my main method. So we'll go and use a for loop, right? Which we did. So I'm going to copy this for loop and say args dot length, and let's say print out the value at the current index, right? So basically, I'm trying to print out what my arguments are passed, right? So you can kind of see the index is getting printed. Let me just comment the index out here. So you can see ABC is printed, okay? Just so that everybody's following along, right? So I went to my exercise, the class file, and I right-clicked on it and I said, run configurations, right? And there's a tab that is arguments here, and then I can pass arguments. So make sure it's separated by space. And if it's separated by space, right, it converts this into an array. So this is converted into an array of string with the length 3, right? And I can print that out, okay? So that's where this string args come into picture. But just keep in mind, you'll very rarely use this, okay? There'll be other mechanisms you'll be taking input from, but this is one way, just to explain the syntax of the main method, okay? Any questions on that? All right. I do want to touch base quickly on how do you create a method, okay? So let's say, this code is really becoming really, it's becoming huge, right? So, and it's not readable, So let's say I want to print out the contents of my array, right? So what I can do is, let's say I want to basically take this out and instead create a method, right, which prints the contents of my array. So I'm going to say public static void print contents of array and give it my input variables here. In this case, I want to take an input of type string, args, or let's say arguments. And I'm going to basically paste whatever I copied over there. So it should be of type array, right? Okay, cool. So I created a new method by using the public static void. Don't worry about the public static for now. Just say that you have to have, your method should always start with public static. And then you need to have a return type. In this case, right, I'm not returning anything, okay? I'm just basically printing something, right? So we're not having a return statement. I give it the name of my method, give it a descriptive name, like say, in this case, I'm saying print contents of array. I'm giving it an input argument. In this case, I'm saying, hey, I want this method to take an array of type string, but it's a string array, right? So that's what this means. And then in this method, I'm basically saying, hey, iterate over the array, right? And then print the contents, right? So since I have this method now, I can get rid of this and instead call that method, right? So say print contents of array, and I have to pass a value, right? So in this, I want to basically pass my array in. Okay. And let's go and run this. Right? So basically this one gets executed and prints your contents of your array. Any questions on this so far? So just to repeat, right? So when you want to create a method for now, right, just make sure you have public static. The void basically is the return type from your method. And you give it your name of the method and what arguments your method should take, okay? In this case, we are basically saying, hey, the arguments are of type string and it's an array, and the name of your arguments is called arguments, right? And within my method, I am basically iterating over whatever is passed in as my input, right? And then printing the contents. So since I have this method that basically iterates over my array and prints its contents, I can basically call that method here and get rid of the original code we had and pass it the array so that we can print the contents. Any questions on this? There are no questions on methods? And we will go over methods in depth in the next class, but this is a quick high level overview of how you can create a method, okay? And another way to do this would be just say I comment that out, let's say I comment this out. I'm just going to get it back to its original state here, right? And let's say I execute this. Another way to create a method, right? Just select that bit of code, right click on it and say refactor and say extract method, okay? That's another way to create a method. And let's say print array values. And you basically see it automatically, magically goes and creates your array method. You can do it manually, okay? And I would suggest you do it manually for the first couple of times, at a later point in time, right? You can use your IDE and help you to refactor code, okay? Refactoring is basically just, making some tweaks, to your code so it looks pretty, okay? So to quickly go over what we did, right? So you're going to comment this out. Let's say I want to extract this to a method. So I select this, yeah, select whatever I want to extract to a method, right click on this. Where is refactor? Yeah, go to refactor and then say extract method, okay? And then it'll ask you, what do you want to name the method, right? So for this method, I'll say print array values, right? And if you go down, it automatically created your method. It gave it your name, and it's pretty. The syntax is very similar to what we did manually, right? Return type is void. The input is of type array. It's of type string array, and it gave it a name, but you can go and rename it to whatever you want this to be, right? Any questions on this? All right, Tara, any questions? All right, if there are no more questions, I want to go over the exercise that we are going to do for this week, okay? It's going to be a little bit challenging, but feel free to go and use the instructor's help, okay? So we're going to do a bubble sort, okay? At the end of the bubble sort, right, what your output should be is your array should be sorted, okay? Let's assume, if my array has values 1, 4, 9, 3, and 5, right? At the end of your exercise, right, this array that you're passing should be sorted, okay? So basically my end result should be 1, right? That's your smallest. The next smallest is 3. The next smallest is 4. The next smallest is 5. And the next smallest is 9, right? At the end of your exercise, right, this should be your result, okay? So we're going to go over how we are going to do this. So you're basically going to take an array and you're going to sort it, and it's called bubble sort, okay? So let's see how this is done. I'm going to describe an algorithm for you, and then you're going to implement it, okay? It's going to be a little bit challenging, okay? But let's see if we can follow along. Any questions on what the exercise is about? Okay, so you're going to take an input array, and then you're going to sort it, and my output should be like this, okay? So how are we going to do this, okay? So let's assume we have an array of numbers, okay? The first step in your bubble sort is you compare the current element, right, with the next element. If at all your current element is lesser than the next element, you don't do anything, okay? So in this case, I would leave 1 and 4 as is, okay? Then you would compare the next element here. You'd compare 4 against 9. You'd see is 4 lesser than 9. If that is true, you do not do anything, right? You basically just leave it like that, okay? The next step is you compare the current element, which is 9, against 3, right? And in this case, you see that 9 is greater, right? It's not lesser than, right? So you go to swap, okay? Go to swap these elements now, okay? So I'm going to swap 3 and 9. And you repeat the steps. You compare 9 against the current, against the next element here. You see that 9 is greater than 5, so you have to swap, okay? Any questions on so far? So you have to repeat this process, right? N times until you see your array is sorted, right? So your next iteration should be, hey, compare 1 against 4. If 1 is lesser than 4, you do nothing, right? You just basically, you leave the elements as is, okay? Then you're going to compare 4 against 3. If 4 is, so basically 4 is lesser than 3, no, right? So if it's not less, right, you got to basically go and swap. So you got a 3 and then 4, okay? And then again, compare 4 against 5. Is 4 lesser than 5, right? So if that is true, you do not do anything. Just leave it like that. And then you would compare 5 against 9, right? So if that condition is met, you don't do anything. So you go over one more iteration. Compare 1 against 3. So 1 is lesser than 3, so you do not do a swap, okay? Compare 3 against 4. 3 is lesser than 4, you do not do a swap. Compare 4 against 5. 4 is lesser than 5, so you do not do a swap. And then 5 is lesser than 9, you do not do a swap, okay? I'm just going to highlight that red just to make a point. And then you do it one more last time. You just do compare these two, and if 1 is lesser than 3, you don't do a swap. Otherwise, you do a swap. Any questions so far?
I did have one question. This is Alia. So just to clarify, this was all done within the same for loop, right?
Yes. So basically, it's going to take you 2 for loops, Alia. Okay. The first for
Okay.
loop, right? You will want to compare the first iteration, right? We'll say, okay, is 1 lesser than 4, right? If it's lesser than, you don't do anything, right? If the condition doesn't meet, then you swap, right? So this is one iteration, Alia, okay? That is one for loop, okay? And you see, I had to basically do this a number of times, right? So you'll actually need 2 for loops, Alia, okay, to kind of do this whole operation, okay? The first for loop, right, should basically compare the current element against the next element. If at all the current element is lesser than the next element, do nothing, right? If it's greater than the next element, then you basically swap. Any questions so far? All right, what I'll tell you is you need to start early on this exercise, okay? So the first step, right, is implement one for loop and implement your swap algorithms, okay? Let's go and see if I can pull up that exercise here. All right, this is the exercise here. So basically assume this is your array, right? 1, 3, 9, 4, 6, 2. I'm just printing the elements in the array, okay? So let me go and execute this, right? And this is available. I'm going to put this in Slack and you should have this. So when I print the elements, right, it's going to say the element at 0 is 1, element at 1 is 3, element at 2 is 9, right? It's just going to print out the elements and it's going to give you the index, okay? Go ahead and implement the first iteration, basically iterate through the loop, right? Compare the current element, compare each element at the current index with the element in the next index. If the element in the current index is greater than the element at the next index, you swap them, okay? So with your first loop, Alia, okay, at the end of your first loop, right, your output should be like this, okay? Because what it's going to do is it's going to compare 1 against 3, right? It doesn't do anything, no swaps. It's going to compare 3 against 9, no swaps, right? But it's going to compare 9 against 4. 9 is definitely greater than 4, so you basically swap, right? And then 9 is here, right? So it compares 9 against 6. So 9 is greater than 6, so it's going to swap these places, right? And then it's going to compare 9 against 2. So it's going to swap 9 out and it's going to put 9 here, right? So at end of your first loop, Alia, this should be our output, right? You see 9 bubbled all the way to the top. Okay? And the reason it's called bubble sort, right, is at the end, each time you do this operation, right, your bigger elements keep bubbling all the way to the top. So at your end of your first iteration, this should be your result, okay? Now, you know that you have to basically, in order to basically make this sort complete, right? You have to iterate over n times, okay? So that's why your second loop comes into picture, you know? And I'm going to kind of show you how your code will look, you know, like, you know, roughly, you know, you'll have a for loop, and within their for loop, you'll have another for loop, okay? Just that's a clue, you know. Any questions? Alia, are you following along?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. There are optimizations that you can do too, okay? So if you kind of see this, right? You do not need to iterate all the way through, right? Your inner loop doesn't need to iterate all the way through, okay? If you kind of see this 9, right? At each step, you will see that your topmost node, right, topmost elements in your array are already sorted, right? So you do not need to go through every element in your array, okay? So that is one of the one of the optimizations you will do, okay? And I've given some description over here. Okay. Step 5 is basically you're just changing your input and running through one of the optimizations you did. Okay. The last optimization you do is if your array is already sorted, right? That basically means that you can exit of your program. And how you can do that is if at all a swap is not implemented, if it doesn't go through the swap, that basically means that your array is completely sorted and you can exit out of your program, right? So at each step, I want you to print the number of iterations it took for your sort to complete, okay? And I've given you a rough estimate of how many iterations your sort should take, you know? For example, after step 2, I think it should complete in 30 iterations. After step 3, it should, even if you implement step 3, it should complete within 15 iterations. And if you complete the step 6, right, your sort should complete within 5 iterations. Any questions? All right, Neil, Isabella, any questions? Do y'all get what you'll have to do for your program, for your assignment?
If I'm working through it and I have questions, I'll be sure to ask you, but I can't think of anything now as I'm looking at it.
Okay, cool, Isabella. So just, I mean, these algorithms, right, are, I mean, one of the toughest. Okay, so these are for college, but just to challenge you, right, to get your for loops in correctly, right, and just keep in mind, this is not the most perfect sort algorithm, okay, uh, but it kind of, I want to illustrate some concepts here, okay. You'll kind of see that if your array is, let's say, 1,000,000 records, right, your program will take forever to complete, and over the next week, we will probably see a better way to do this sort, okay? All right, so if there are no questions, I'm going to post this exercise in the Slack channel. Make sure you start early, okay? And I'm 100% sure you will have questions. So go ahead, use the Slack channel, ask questions. If not, Slack one of us, maybe me or Richa, and we'll help you out, All right. With that, I'm sorry we went over time. Hopefully you will all complete your exercise, by next week. All right. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk to you next week.